All right, Randy, Vanessa with you. As we wrapped up, listening, we were both in on that the Zoom call, Vanessa, with General Manager Nick Caserio. I think a lot of people were ready for this because we hadn't heard from him during this Deshaun Watson deal, but he addressed or tried to address the Watson thing. It wasn't shocking the way he handled that, but he was talking about the draft, just the upcoming voluntary workouts as well. What's your initial takeaway? Let's start with Watson, and that was one of the questions he got early.
Yeah, I mean, he got so many Watson questions, and you understand, right? Because we haven't heard from him since this situation with Deshaun Watson kind of unfolded. I kind of joked around, this isn't his fault, but I said his nickname should be Patches O'Houlihan from dodgeball because he was dodging, ducking, dipping, diving, all these Deshaun Watson questions. Again, not his fault. None of this is his fault. He inherited all of this, but he really was dodging all of that. And legally, Randy, Brian Weiss could tell us more, but legally he probably has to. He can't really give exact answers. So I thought he did as much as he could. The questions about what they're looking for in the draft and all of that, I thought he did a good job of answering, like intangibles that he wanted. So I think he did as much as he could, but it's just such a sticky situation. It
is, and they just can't they can't get it. I think you're right. I mean, it's for legal reasons. They just can't say much right now until this thing plays out. And it still might be a while as we get more information that came out yesterday. And so I think they've got to carry on. This is my opinion. It's not anything they say. You may or may not agree. I think they've just got to carry on as if he's not in the picture because I think that's he got a question, I think, from one of the reporters there on the Zoom today about Tyrod Taylor. Was whether this Watson situation was going on or not. And I think that was a good question too, that, and Nick had a good answer. He said, listen, we only have one quarterback on the roster, so we have to move forward in that position anyway. And they were able to get a guy like Tyrod Taylor, who's a starter in the league, in case they without Watson, whenever this does get resolved, because I do think there's going to be a suspension of some capacity, maybe longer, maybe shorter, who knows yet. But I thought that was a good question too, trying to move on and carry forward until they get, more of an answer on if they're going to have him available or if he still doesn't even want to play here after this is all said and done. Right.
It seems like before all these allegations, David Coley and Nick Caserio, we didn't hear from them much, but it seemed like they were operating as if Deshaun would be their quarterback. They continuously said, he's our quarterback. I want to reemphasize he's our quarterback. And I kind of agree with you, Randy. I think it seems now that they might be functioning as if, okay, we're not going to have Deshaun Watson, whether it's because he's suspended, whether it's because he sits out. It's like, it just seems like they're operating as if they know he's probably not going to be there for whatever reason. I'm not saying he's going to be found guilty or it'll go to trial, but like you said, he could be suspended even if he never gets charged. And that's something people have to remember too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, despite whatever the outcome is going to be, you're right. I think the way the league operates now with players and conduct policies they have in place, I think there's going to be one. There's going to be a suspension. But just the link, nobody really knows yet. But he got into the draft a little bit. And I thought it was interesting, too, because with what we're still under some protocols, it's a little bit different than a year ago. But you're limited on the access you have to these players and the evaluations, which is so important. The way the NFL in normal situations evaluates prospects coming out in the draft. They can go to pro days, but then it's related to like what you and I are doing right now. It's a Zoom.
Right.
And he said, they can still, on a Zoom call, look at a board and do what, but it's not the same as face-to-face. So I find that interesting as much as they really break down players every single year. I think they're still limited to a point and rolling the dice. Every team, not just the Texans, every team's rolling the dice on some of these guys coming out.
Well, think about how quick it used to be. You were just in Indy. Obviously, I'm from that area. So with the combine, they would work out, they would walk and get their medical physicals, whatever. And then they would sit them in a room at the JW Marriott and do an in-person interview and try to pick up on their body language. And they don't have that. So I was at University of Houston's Pro Day last week, I think. And they had some guys from Rice there as well. And, the scouts could still be there, but they couldn't get too close. And then, like you said, you just touched on it. They can't sit down with them. They can't get that in person that they want. So I do feel confident that Nick Caserio is going to do as well as he can, but to be a first-year general manager and then have to deal with all of this would be a lot. Yeah,
when he's wearing that particular hat, he had a big role there in New England, but he didn't have that GM title. For a little bit more pressure on the shoulders of Caserio and all the scouts and everybody's got on board trying to evaluate these guys coming out. They don't have a pick until the third round, but I liked his answer. I liked a lot of what he said today. Actually, I think he does a pretty good news conference. He was talking about, listen, we know we don't have anybody in the first and second round, but that didn't change the way we evaluated. We evaluated as if we're right there because you just never come draft day if something. I doubt it's going to happen with what they've got currently on this roster, but if there's a way to move up or whatever, you got to have your board, as he said, the board down top to bottom. You got to know where these players fall in the ranking system, at least for their team rankings, and you got to be prepared. But even by third round, and you hear from some of the draft experts out there too, they really say the same thing he was saying. There's a lot of talent out there, and I think they're going to go heavy defense. For some of these picks, and who knows? Maybe they'll go get another young quarterback if they feel like somebody's out there. Mond's been mentioned as a guy that could be floating around there in that third round when they pick.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, the defense last year was just so pitiful in so many ways, and I think, it goes without saying that J.J. Watt's gone, right? But there were a lot of areas where the Texans ranked last in the NFL, and then oh, by the way, they have this expensive O-line, and Deshaun Watson is sacked. I think in the top 3 quarterbacks of the NFL, that's frustrating as well. So it's an uphill battle. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that they're in kind of a rebuild mode. And if Deshaun Watson, for whatever reason, doesn't play for the Texans, again, whether he's sitting out or they trade him or he's suspended, it is straight up rebuild mode. You're talking about a team that 2 years ago, it had Jadeveon Clowney, J.J. Watt, DeAndre Hopkins, Deshaun Watson, and all those guys will be gone. Right. So I think that's a tough pill for Texans fans to swallow. And you've covered the team pretty much from the get-go, so I can imagine that and you see how frustrating that would be. But I don't think that's a stretch to say that it would be rebuild mode. No,
I think you're right on. I mean, I think it's going to be a tough unless they shock the world. I mean, I just don't see with the schedule they're this season as well. I mean, I think pretty much you're going in unless there's some kind of crazy roster change, which I won't rule out because I think they're going to keep really massaging this roster and best they can, so to speak, and get it ready for the season. I don't think what we're seeing right now is going to be the roster. Even it's bigger right now because they haven't made cuts and stuff, but I think it's going to be changing a lot when players get cut from other teams during training camps and stuff. I think he's shown he's not afraid to make moves. As we've seen,
he is not afraid to do that. He's made so many of them.
I know. But so you got the draft coming up. He also addressed the off-season voluntary workouts, I believe start next week. And somebody asked if he thought Watson would show up. I think even in a normal situation, you're not going to really see the starting quarterback there anyway. Most teams don't have their starters there or the starting quarterback there. But anyway. Asked, but I think with what's going on right now was a fair question. So we'll see who all shows up. I know there's some teams out there. It's made news last day or two. There's some teams that are already dealing with players that are still concerned with the safety protocol situation, and they may not take part. But it is voluntary, so it's not like you have to be there.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's going to be one thing that maybe it's team by team, but everybody's going to have a comfortability level with what they're doing. Mm-hmm. I don't think Deshaun Watson was planning on showing up anyway, from what it sounds like. So, and that's not even related to the assault cases. That's just when he was disgruntled and wanted to leave. So it's kind of like we always hear that this is nowhere being close to being over as far as these allegations go, because Rusty Hardin seems like he wants to fight it. And I think even if you were to take that out of it with the Texans, I think this is going to be an ongoing thing because John McClain had even said, these teams aren't coming after him as hard as they were.
Right.
So you look at it and you're like, okay, well, maybe the Texans missed their window to get all this value for Deshaun Watson. Who knows? Right. There's so many what ifs.
Yeah, and they could, and maybe they could have. That's a fair question. I don't know if it's fair to blame them for that because at the same time as before the allegations came out.
Yeah, they had no idea.
They were probably waiting to see, okay, what can we get for, they're playing the typical negotiating game I think most teams would do to see we get the most out of a guy like that. And then all this stuff started coming down and the phones didn't quit ringing, but I'm sure they cut down quite a bit as McClain mentioned. Yeah. So there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, even when this does get resolved, who's going to be the team out there that says, even with that cloud hanging over Watson because of what's been going on, who's going to be that team that takes that chance and takes that step to say, okay, we'll do this for Deshaun Watson. So who knows? But anyway, it was good to hear from Caserio. But again,
yes.
And he dodged some of it, but had some good stuff as well on the draft and kind of how they're preparing and getting ready. But I thought he carried himself pretty well. He's a good, as I texted you during the Zoom, I said, he's a good soundbite. There's no doubt. He thinks it through. He says the word right a lot.
He does.
He'll say that about 3 times every answer, but
it's his job. I mean, I think people think that I'm like putting him down when I call him Patches O'Houlihan, saying like quoting dodgeball. It's his job to do that, though. Like it's his job to dodge, and he did a really, really good job of dodging all those questions. So he's doing as good as he can for this situation.
All right, so that's the latest, at least what we took away from the Texans availability today with Nick Caserio. We want to get it here on click2houston.com. So have a great weekend. I know we'll talk more about it coming up Sunday on Sports Sunday. And by the way, it's Vanessa's birthday, so everybody wish her a happy birthday.
Thanks, Randy.
See you guys soon. Bye.